this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. You have to excuse the noise of the rain. It comes and goes, and the consequential low light level, UK, and all that. Thanks for all your comments on this problem, Vanda, all of which have been considered, looked into, and, well, let's go from there. Firstly, this is highly likely to be cold damage, in which case it's not going to recover, it's not going to get better, and bad leaves like this are not going to last long. That's going to totally ruin the appearance of this plant, which is going to put me off it enough to possibly even chuck it out, if that's what it is. If it's cold damage, it's not going to get any worse, yeah? So it won't change. Nothing is going to change. The marks that are there are just going to stay there. They will gradually deteriorate the leaves in question. I pulled this leaf out deliberately because it's the worst affected, and it is bad. Right, that's consideration number one, and a good possibility. It was also suggested it could be false spider mite damage. It's the least likely, but still a possibility. I got my magnifying glass. I had a real close-in look at this plant. I can see nothing living on it. So it's still the least likely, but was a good thought. The false spider mites, as opposed to the red spider mites, they're the two most common that you're likely to come across on your orchids. The red spider mites you can see. And I've always said the easy way to tell if you think you've got them is to just rub over the area where you think they are and look at your thumb, and if it's got a rusty appearance, it's red spider mites. They like warm, dry air. So they ain't getting that out here through the winter, that's for sure. I've got cooler air and it's moist. So they would not be happy in that environment. The false spider mites are not so fussed on their environment that they live in, so you can get them in most conditions. They're a bit of a pain in the butt to get rid of if they really get a hold, and they can spread. So first thoughts on that are that all three of my Vandas are in close proximity and touching. Yeah, so to just get it on one plant and not the two either side of it, because this one lives in the middle between the other two, is a low probability. And as I said, there were no signs of life on the plant. So probably not. The other one was the orchid fleck virus, known as OFV in capital letters. That's how you normally see it referred to. This is, as viruses go, probably quite common compared with some of the others that are around. I've looked that up, and in very close detail on Vandas specifically, because this is a Vanda, so I wasn't interested in what it looks like on other types of orchids, simply because it varies in its appearance depending on the leaf type. Yeah, but on Vandas, the markings are irregular, and you've got, obviously within the structure of the leaf, you've got veining that, you know, that runs parallel with the leaf, and the OFV virus tends to have that veining showing from the marks, so you get a bad discoloration in the central part of the mark, followed by it sort of tailing off in the direction of the veins coming out from the marks. And I don't see that anywhere. These are blobs without that veining showing. So although that's still a probability, it may or may not be. The other probability, which I think I've excluded, was the nutrient deficiency related issue. For that to do that sort of damage, it would have had to have been severe over a prolonged period, and would be highly likely to have affected everything that goes in that bucket. So it's the least likely, and if it was that, it's been corrected. That's not going to make the leaves get better, but it could stop it getting any worse. So bottom line is, the most likely, and they always say when you're doing detective work, the most probable is probably what it is. It could have succumbed to cold damage. Now, as I've said, I've lowered my temperature this winter for the first time, and the previous 2 winters were mild. Yeah? And during those 2 winters, the thermostat was set at 15 degrees C, dropping down to 14, coming back up to 15. Whereas this winter, I actually lowered that down. Yeah, I took that down to 13. That's 2 degrees C difference, which meant it dropped to 12, came back up to 13. Now this hybrid could contain entirely warm growers, and that could have just been enough to actually hit this one, whereas the others are okay. They're more cold tolerant. That is a relatively simple explanation. But irrespective of what's wrong with it, what I'm watching now is to see if it gets any worse. If it's the OFV virus, it's going to get worse, and it's going to start appearing on good leaves. It's not just going to stay where it is, it's going to move through the plant, and there's nothing can be done about it. There is no cure for viruses. So if it's that, the plant will steadily get worse, so I have to watch it and monitor it. Yeah? If it's cold damage, it'll sit where it is and it won't get any worse. The badly affected leaves will eventually die, especially that one. That's lost so much of its structure. The chances of that leaf living are very slim. This one might actually survive. This one may well survive. Yeah, so they're affected in different ways. This is another that might make it. But this is the worst one. So if it's cold damage, this is the one to watch. And the yellow markings will not spread, because I've raised my thermostat now. It's spring, so even if we get a cold spell, I don't want those low temperatures anymore. They were for the resting dendrobiums. Possibly at the expense of some of my other orchids, that remains to be seen. But yeah, it could be cold damage, the most likely. If it's OFV, the plant is doomed. It will get steadily worse, it will progress throughout the plant, and if I see it progressing from this point forward, it'll just go out. Simple as that. But the OFV virus is spread by false spider mites. They are carriers. So I'm not sure I've ever had those. But the trouble is, when you do routine systemic pest killer type programs, which I had running last year, on and off, it wasn't as regular as it should have been, in theory they'd have got whacked. So they wouldn't have been there long enough. And it's highly unlikely it was that. So all I'm going to do is carry on what I've always been doing with these plants, making sure that I've sorted out any nutrient-related problems due to pH. That's sorted now, so that's not going to happen again. And just keep my eye on it. That's all I can do. If it's a virus, it's under the hedge. If it's cold damage, it's going to ruin the look of the plant, and it might end up under the hedge anyway, despite it probably being my favourite Vanda bloom. The big, large blue one, Yeah. But nonetheless, these things happen. And you do have to bear in mind, somebody pointed out that the heater didn't get switched on one night, and it was bitterly cold. It actually got down to 8 degrees out here. Now, it wasn't for long. I'd say probably 4 hours at the most, but that's enough for sensitive plants to actually get whacked. That was a severe drop in temperature for a relatively short time, but that could have done damage around the place, So that's where I'm going to leave it. It's all the comments gratefully appreciated. Workload rocketed. I cut my own throat sometimes by putting these problems up and asking for help. Obviously, my comments get responded to in some shape or form. Most comments get a reply comment, but they all at least get acknowledged so to say that, just to show that I've read them and thanks and all that sort of stuff. So workload went up a bit, but I've been getting up earlier lately, and until it gets light and I can get out and about and start doing things, that time is quite useful to just sit at the computer and sort out my channel, watch other people's videos, get my comments sorted out, and think about what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. Anyway, so I'm going to leave this one at that. I think, personally, with all the things that have been pointed out and suggested and everything like that, plus another sit down this morning and a think, I've come to the conclusion that it is either the OFV virus or it's cold damage. I don't think any of the other things would have done that quickly. So I'm going to leave it with that and watch it carefully. As I said, if it's cold damage, then leaves that have no signs of the damage are going to stay exactly as they are. And the new growth will carry on growing. Yeah? So I'll just have to watch it and see. As I say, if it's a virus, it goes out. If it's cold damage, it won't get any worse. But just think of what this plant's going to look like if it loses some of its central leaves. It's going to have a top growing, some older leaves down the bottom that were not in the best of health when I got it. It's going to look so tatty, it will annoy me. So despite its blooms, it might end up having to go. But we'll keep our eye on it, and every now and again we'll go back and have another look. Certainly if I come to a definitive conclusion that involves some action, like walking outside and waving bye-bye, I'll let you know. But thanks for all your help and suggestions and things that I could do with my pH meter. If it was biodegradable, that might go out under the hedge. But quite honestly, I've got that working now. I've realised the mistake I was making. And although it's not 100% reliable, it's plenty good enough for the use I put it to, which is to find out what the pH level is after I've added my nutrients. I don't need to know what the pH is of my RO water. I know. I don't need to know again and again. So it'll only get used after additives have been put in the water, at which point it seems to work fine. So a major upgrade at great expense is off the cards at the moment. I'll stick with the one I've got, and as I said, it seems to be performing reasonably well now. And I'm getting consistent readings as I used to get with the first pH meter I ever got, which lasted several years until I broke it. That's the only reason I had to replace it. I put my finger through the little glass bulb and broke it, so I got a replacement. That one didn't work and I got a full refund. Got another one. That one was just readings all over the place, irrespective of what was in the water. That was just rubbish, so I stopped using that and got yet another one and paid a bit more money for it, which is the one I've got now. And quite honestly, for what I use it for, it's fine for now. So we'll leave this one at that then, and thanks for all your help. And by the way, the plant's isolated. It now no longer ever touches anything else. Unfortunately, I can't go to the degree of watering it totally separately. That would involve far, far too much trouble for one single orchid. So I'm not going down that road. It'll carry on going in the bucket. That's not changing. But I'll make sure it doesn't touch anything else. But in the main, that orchid fleck virus is its main transmitter are those false spider mites, but nonetheless orchids can just seem to get that. That does worry me that this sort of thing goes around, but it's something we have to live with, and often these things are down to just non-perfect conditions. You go to these nurseries where they've got these perfect conditions and see acres and acres of smashing looking plants. It's because their conditions are perfect, mine aren't. This has got too cold, and I'm pretty sure that's what it is.